Thank you for subscribing to our channel. Today is Thursday, November 26, 2020. CNN report: Democratic fight emerges ahead of appointment to fill Kamala Harris's Senate seat. A cross-country lobbying campaign for Vice President-elect Kamala Harris's Senate seat has pitted factions divided by race, gender and geography against one another and heightened internal tensions within at least one influential caucus on Capitol Hill. Prominent African Americans officials would like California Gov. Gavin Newsom to pick Reps. Karen Bass or Barbara Lee to replace Harris, the only black woman serving in the Senate.
BBC report: Sri Lanka digs trench to keep elephants away from rubbish dump. Elephants regularly swarm to the landfill site near a wildlife sanctuary in the eastern town of Ampara. Along with food scraps, they consume plastic, which slowly kills them, officials say. Images of the elephants foraging through the waste in Ampara have shocked environmentalists. Plastic from landfill sites is a known killer of wild elephants, which are estimated to number about 7,500 in Sri Lanka.
Deutsche Welle report: Russia pressures Lukashenko to change constitution. While visiting Minsk on Thursday, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov piled up pressure on Belarus strongman Alexander Lukashenko to deliver on the promise of constitutional reform. Lavrov said Moscow was worried about the unrest in the smaller country, where protesters have been demanding Lukashenko's resignation and accusing him of forging the results of the August election. We of course have an interest in the situation being calm, stable, and we think that beginning the constitutional reform initiated by the country's leadership would contribute to this, Lavrov said.
Al Jazeera report: AstraZeneca says its COVID-19 vaccine needs additional study. AstraZeneca might have to run an additional global trial to assess the efficacy of its COVID-19 vaccine, after concerns were raised about the effectiveness of its jab. The British company's chief executive Pascal Soriot was quoted as saying in a Bloomberg News report on Thursday that an additional study would be run to evaluate a lower dosage that performed better than a full amount in AstraZeneca's studies.
Al Jazeera report: The greatest, thousands of Argentinians say goodbye to Maradona. Buenos Aires, Argentina, as Luciano Perez walked with his son Dante towards Argentina's presidential palace, where Diego Maradona's coffin was on display. He took solace in the crowds that had gathered along the Avenida de Mayo. He was glad to see that tens of thousands of people had showed up to honor the football icon he had grown up with and to whom he owed his love of the game. But when he stepped inside the Casa Rosada, and past the closed coffin, cloaked in the Argentine flag and jerseys worn by El Diego, his emotions darkened.
CNN report: COVID pandemic disproportionately hurting women, UN warns. The COVID-19 pandemic has set gender equality back years, with women around the world taking on the lion's share of extra domestic chores, the United Nations reported on Thursday. It comes one day after the international body warned that the pandemic is driving further violence against refugee, displaced and stateless women and girls. Thursday's Whose Time to Care report from UN Women found that, while both women and men have taken on extra unpaid domestic work throughout the pandemic, women face a greater burden of care.
BBC report: Diego Maradona, Argentina football icon's off-pitch politics. He cultivated relations with some of Latin America's most prominent and controversial left-wing leaders, including Cuba's Fidel Castro, Venezuela's Hugo Chavez and Bolivia's Evo Morales. The late Cuban leader was a close friend, so close that Maradona had Fidel Castro's face tattooed on his leg. Coincidentally, both men died on the same day, the 25th of November, 4 years apart. Their relationship deepened when the footballer settled in Cuba for a few years to recover from his drug addiction.
Fox report: Zombie minks in Denmark that were killed to stop spread of coronavirus appear to rise from their graves. Minks infected with a mutated strain of the novel coronavirus appeared to rise from the grave this week after thousands were culled in Denmark earlier in the month. The decision to kill the animals was made following the discovery that 11 people had been sickened by the same strain found in mink farms and factories. However, in the haste to dispose of the bodies, Danish authorities reported Thursday that some of the carcasses had risen to the surface of their makeshift graves after gases built up inside the decomposing bodies.
Fox report: Santa Ana winds on Thanksgiving cause wildfire concern for Southern California residents. Gusty conditions throughout the West have put Southern California on high alert, prompting the National Weather Service (NWS) to issue red flag warnings. Low humidity and forceful Santa Ana winds between 40 miles per hour and 65 miles per hour have forced power companies to warn residents about potential power shutoffs amid an increased wildfire risk. The Thanksgiving wind event is expected to be cold, and those impacted will see temperatures in the mid-60s to low 70s.
Deutsche Welle report. Coronavirus Digest. Germany passes 1 million cases. The world's largest parade, Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade in New York City, a mainstay of the festivities, has been scaled down this year, with the millions who typically attend staying home and the procession lasting for 1 block, rather than 2 miles (3.2 kilometers). Many families are left resigned to online meetings as they tuck into their Thanksgiving turkey dinners. But the TSA reported more than 6 million airline passengers passed through U.S. airports between Friday and Wednesday, making it the busiest weekend since mid-March.
Fox report. 2 NYPD officers shot in Queens released from hospital. It's a Thanksgiving to remember. The 2 NYPD officers who were shot while responding to a domestic dispute in Queens were released from the hospital Thursday, just in time to spend the holiday with their loved ones. Joseph Murphy and Christopher Wells were greeted by dozens of their brothers in blue as they were rolled out of Jamaica Hospital in wheelchairs. Both men were flanked by their wives, with Wells carrying their bundled-up 2-week-old baby in her arms.
CNN report. Marcus Paul, a strength coach for the Dallas Cowboys, dies. Marcus Paul, strength and conditioning coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys, has died. The 54-year-old experienced a non-COVID-19 related medical emergency Tuesday morning at the team's headquarters. He was immediately treated by the Cowboys medical staff and was transported to a nearby hospital by ambulance for further treatment. It was there, while surrounded by family, that he passed away Wednesday evening, according to the team.
CNN report. Ethiopia enters final phase of operation in Tigre region, says Prime Minister. Ethiopia has entered the final phase of a law enforcement military operation in the northern restive region of Tigray after a 72-hour deadline to surrender expired. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed tweeted in a statement on Thursday, the last peaceful gate which had remained open for the TPLF clique to walk through have now been firmly closed. The statement read, referring to the region's ruling party, the Tigray People's Liberation Front.
BBC report. Australian, war crimes, troops to be fired over Afghan killings. They are suspected of being accessories or witnesses to the killings, or of being dishonest in testifying. They are separate from the 19 Special Air Service troops who could face prosecution for the murders. Australia's Prime Minister and top military commander have apologised. Afghanistan called the murders unforgivable but welcomed last week's report as a step towards justice. 2 more soldiers are reported to have been sacked already.
Deutsche Welle report. Austrian village of fucking decides to change its name. Australian airline Qantas wants to introduce compulsory vaccination for intercontinental flights. We will require international travelers to be vaccinated before we allow them on board, Qantas CEO Alan Joyce stated. The general terms and conditions would be adjusted accordingly. Whether this will also be a requirement for domestic flights has not yet been decided. Both cities will launch a travel bubble on November 22, which will allow people to move quarantine-free in each direction, their governments announced on Wednesday, November 11, in a rare piece of good news for the pandemic-battered tourism industry.
Fox report. CIA officer killed during combat in Somalia. A senior CIA officer was killed during combat in Somalia, according to reports. The officer, who wasn't named, was a former member of the Navy's SEAL Team 6 and belonged to the Special Activities Center, the agency's paramilitary division, the New York Times reported Wednesday. The officer's death comes after President Trump suggested he may withdraw troops out of Somalia in the future. The U.S. has 700 troops in Somalia tasked with working with local forces to defeat the terrorist group al-Shabaab, according to Reuters.
Al Jazeera report. UN Agency for Palestinians runs out of money for first time. The United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees said that, for the first time in its history, it has run out of money until the end of the year. The UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East (UNRWA) relies on funds from UN member states and the European Union, but said it has been chronically underfunded for years. Philip Lazzarini, UNRWA Commissioner General, said at a news conference in Gaza on Thursday that the agency was on the edge of a cliff.
Thank you for watching 5 p.m. Recap. To be notified, you can subscribe our channel and activate the bell.